let us discuss about the development of the computer program in solving the steady state heat conduction problem in 2 dimension using finite element method. So, earlier we have discussed how to store the mesh information and calculate the shape functions and their derivatives at the Gauss points, and also how to calculate the Jacobian. Okay. So, using that Jacobian we discussed how we can calculate the gradient of ni's in the physical element from the gradient of ni hat in the master element. Now, construct the element stiffness matrix, element force vector, and take care of the Neumann boundary part. Then we will assemble the element contribution to the global system of equations, and then finally we will enforce the appropriate Dirichlet boundaries, okay, and finally we will solve and visualize the results. So, let us now go ahead and look at the process or procedure by which we calculate the stiffness entries and force entries for a given element using Gauss quadrature. So, let us look at the algorithm that is given at the left. So, first we will loop over all the elements that I will show in the whole code. So, everything inside we are now describing. So, inside a element loop for a given Gauss point, what we are going to do? We first calculate the or find out the coordinates of the corner nodes of a given element, kth element. Then at a given Gauss point we will calculate the Jacobian and the determinant of the Jacobian using the process that we described in the earlier slide. Then we will calculate the coordinates in the physical element corresponding to the pth Gauss point in the master element. So, that also has been explained, and from which we can calculate the value of the conductivity, okay, of the material at the physical point, and also the heat source term, alright, at a given point xp yp. So, just note down xp yp is the coordinate of the point in the physical element corresponding to the Gauss point in the master element. Then inside that loop of P, which is basically running over all the Gauss points, now what we are going to do? We are having two for loops, nested for loops. One is over I equal to 1 to number of degrees of freedom per element, and j going from 1 to the number of degrees of freedom per element. So, in this case we have 4 nodes, and in each node we have 1 degree of freedom. So, total we have 4 degrees of freedom per element. So, for I we are first calculating the gradient of Ni, okay, from the gradient of Ni in the master element, okay. The process has already been explained. Similarly, we have calculated the gradient of Nj from the corresponding gradient of Nj hat in the master element. Then we evaluated the integrand. What is the integrand for evaluating Kij? If we remember, we had, if I write Kij is basically the integration over Ae, okay. If I write the same thing after mapping, so it is Ae hat, the master element, okay, then we do not need to refer E, okay. So, we can put A hat, and then we are evaluating the lambda at the Gauss point, then gradient of Ni, that is at physical element, okay, xp yp, dot we have gradient of Nj, alright. Then we have to multiply with the corresponding the determinant of the Jacobian, that is calculated at xp yp, into the weight Wp, okay. And then what we did, we substituted or we replaced this integration symbol with a summation over p running over 1 to number of Gauss points. Alright. So, this part we have to evaluate at every Gauss point. So, this is what has been done. This is the conductivity at xpyp, the gradient of Ni at the physical point xpyp. We are taking transpose of it because this is gradient of Ni dot gradient of Nj. Alright. Then multiplying with the Jacobian at evaluated at the Gauss point P and the corresponding weight at Gauss point P. Alright. And since we are looping over all P's, so basically it is getting summed up, because that is why we are adding it to the same Kij. Alright. Then the loop for J closes. Alright. And similarly we evaluate the element force entry. So, element force entry Fi plus the heat source term at xpyp, the value of the shape function Ni, which is same as Ni hat at the Gauss point, then similarly the determinant of the Jacobian at P and the weight at the Gauss point P. So, this at the end of the loop over P, which is ending here, we are getting the element stiffness matrix and element force vector for element K. Alright. So, this is all about, this is basically taking care of the numerical integration using Gauss quadrature. Now, let us look at the corresponding part in the computer program that has been written in MATLAB. So, if you look at the right hand side, okay, in this figure, what we are doing, we are first we are ensuring all the entries in the element stiffness matrix and the element force vector are 0, okay. And what is the size? Size is the number of degrees of freedom per element. So, in this case the number of degrees of freedom per element is 4. So, the Ke is 4 by 4 containing only zeros, and this we are doing for every element K, alright, because once we add the contribution of kth element, okay, to the global system of equation, then we will again calculate the contribution of the K plus 1th element. So, in that case it should not get added, because as you can see here we are basically adding the force entries to itself, alright. So, that is why at the beginning of every element we have to ensure that Ke and Fe are empty, alright. So, this is very important. Then we calculate the corner nodes, okay. So, these are the local numbers, okay. For every element these corner nodes are basically the local number. In the current case where we are using the quadrilateral element with degree p equal to 1, these are basically 1, 2, 3, 4. So, now what we will do, we will calculate for kth element, we are calculating the degrees of freedom, or the, you can say in this case degrees of freedom and the number of nodes are same, because we have 1 DOF per node, alright. So, for this problem node and degrees of freedom are same number. So, here we are calculating the corresponding global number that is stored in the connectivity matrix. If you remember, the kth row of the connectivity matrix is storing the global node numbers for element K corresponding to the local number 1, 2, 3, 4. So, first we are getting the global node number, and from there we are using the coordinate matrix to calculate the coordinate, alright. So, coordinate matrix first column gives us the x coordinate, and similarly the second column gives us the y coordinate. So, this way we collect all the x and y coordinate of that particular element, kth element, and then we are forming the coordinate matrix, alright. So, if you remember, if you go to the earlier slide, we had the coordinate matrix of this shape x1, x2, x3, x4, and then y1, y2, y3, y4. So, this coordinate xy, okay, construct this matrix for the kth element. Then what we do? Then we go and loop over the Gauss point P, for kth element, and we follow this algorithm whatever has been discussed now. So, first we calculate the physical point corresponding to the pth Gauss point. If you can see, this is a pth Gauss point. So, N2D is basically returning the shape function values at the pth Gauss point and multiplied by the x coordinate. So, basically we are making use of xi ni hat. So, that gives us the corresponding xp. So, if I use it as xi p eta p, so we are getting the pth coordinate, okay, the coordinate in the physical element corresponding to the pth Gauss point. So, similarly we get the YGP. Then we followed the procedure that has been discussed in the earlier slide to calculate the Jacobian. Alright. So, what we did with the coordinate matrix just constructed for the kth element, we multiplied with the matrix that contains the derivatives of the shape function in the master element at Gauss point P, and then we calculated the determinant of the Jacobian that we will be using, okay, while doing the numerical integration. Next, we calculated the derivatives of the shape functions, okay, in the physical element, because now we had the derivatives in the master element. So, we have to convert the derivatives in the physical element. So, how do we do that? We just pre-multiplied with J inverse transpose. Alright. So, once we complete that, then what we did at the corresponding Gauss point, we evaluated the conductivity, and the corresponding Gauss point we calculated the body source term. Alright. Then we looped over I and j's. That is exactly what we have done here. Alright. So, I going from 1 to n number of degrees of freedom per element, j goes from the number of degrees of freedom per element. Alright. So, this is lambda at the Gauss point, this is dni, that is the derivative of ni shape function in the physical element, this is the derivative of the nj's in the physical element, then multiplied by the determinant j into the weight. Alright. So, this is exactly what the thing that has been written in the algorithm. Alright. Then the loop over j closes, and similarly we calculated the force entry. So, force entry, it is the body source term at the Gauss point times the shape function ni at p, then the determinant j into the weight. So, that is how we calculated the element stiffness matrix and the element force vector. Just note down that in the element force vector we have taken care of the only the source term, the Neumann boundary part has not been included. So, that part we have to also take care. So, now this end is basically the end of P, alright, not the end of the for loop, as you can see from this vertical line. Alright. So, this shows that the loop over P closes here. So, once this is complete, so at the end we are getting the element stiffness matrix and the element force vector for element K. Alright. So, now let us go ahead and calculate the Neumann boundary part. Okay. So, what we have to do first, let us understand, say if this is the domain and we had, suppose we had 4 elements 1, 2, 3, 4, and we had the node numbers as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Alright. And we said that at this boundary we had Qn specified, at this boundary we had Qn specified, right. And then in the boundary condition type, like the variable, what we stored? We stored for a given element, we just stored some numbers in the columns. What does it mean? It means that the first number corresponds to the first edge, okay, of an element. The second number corresponds to the second edge of that element, third number corresponds to the third edge and similarly the fourth edge. So, these are the local numbers edge wise, alright, in a given element. So, we had 4 entries in the kth row. Okay. Kth row basically represents the kth element. Now, how we ensure that, or how we represented that edge corresponds to a Neumann boundary. If we say that, we said that any boundary which is shared by the Neumann boundary or coincides with the Neumann boundary is denoted with a positive number. So, this boundary we denoted as 1, this boundary we denoted as 2 and this boundary we denoted as 3, alright. So, if I write for k equal to 1 for the first element, these numbers where the first edge coincides with the first Neumann boundary, the second edge is an internal edge, so it is 0, third edge is also an internal edge, so that is 0, and fourth edge coincides with Dirichlet boundary, so we refer that as -1, alright. So, all the entries in the BC type which are positive, that denotes that the edge of that element coincides with some of the Neumann boundaries, okay, and the number will tell which Neumann boundary it is coinciding with. So, from this piece of code, we are basically calculating which edge of a given element coincides with the Neumann boundary. So, all the edges of a given element, okay, will be found out, whether it coincides with 1, 2 or 3 does not matter. It will just tell us that which are the edges of which element which coincides with the Neumann boundary. Now, once we identify the edge number, so but this edge number is a local number. So, once we identify the edge number, then what we are going to do? We are going to calculate the contribution of the Neumann boundary numerically. So, initially we had Qn, Ni, okay, Ni and Ni hat are same, and ds, alright. So, that is the thing that we had. So, Qn can depend upon x and y because it can vary along the boundary, alright. So, it has to be evaluated at every point on the boundary, and this also need to be calculated, but this is not the 2-dimensional shape function, this is an 1-dimensional shape function once we map it to the master element. So, this has already been discussed, this part. So, how it has been incorporated here is we loop over all the edges, okay, all the edges that where we found that the kth element coincides with the Neumann boundary, right. So, then what we do? We go to each of these edges individually, okay. Just note down one thing, this piece of code is still inside the element loop k equal to 1 to the total number of elements. This piece of code is still inside that kth loop. So, we are doing everything for the kth element. So, we are going to each of these local edges for the element k, okay, finding out the corresponding global nodes on that edge, alright. So, suppose if I am going to element 2, say k equal to 2, then this will tell us that 5 and 2 are the global nodes that are coinciding with Neumann boundary 1, and 2 and 6 are the part or the nodes, global nodes that coincide with Neumann boundary 2, alright. So, once we have identified the global nodes, we are getting the corresponding coordinates from the coordinate matrix, alright, that we already have stored. Then from the coordinate of these two nodes, say 2 and 6, we know the node points coordinates. So, we calculated the length of the side because that is what is required while calculating the contribution, okay, numerically, alright. So, let us look into this piece of algorithm, okay, to understand that numerical integration part. First, we are going to each of the edges. There are 4 edges, and we are checking that whether that edge coincides with the Neumann boundary. If it coincides, then we are calculating the length of that side, okay, the mth side or mth edge we are calculating the length, then we are going to want to number of degrees of freedom on that edge. Okay, for a given edge, say suppose if I go to this edge, fourth element, if I look at the third edge of fourth element, so the nodes are 4 and 7. Alright, so there are 2 nodes and in this case we have 2 degrees of freedom. So I goes from 1 to 2. Then we have another loop for each of the Gauss points. So in this case the Gauss points are in the master element xi bar, okay, varying from -1 to 1. So that edge has been mapped to this edge. Alright. So and using that map we are getting the corresponding coordinate, alright, for a given Gauss point xi bar p. Alright, and at that Gauss point we are calculating the heat flux, because as I said heat flux can vary along the edge. So we are evaluating that heat flux, and once we calculate Qn, then we have denoted a new vector Fen. So that basically denotes the force vector part, only taking care of the Neumann boundary condition. Alright, if that boundary lies with the Neumann boundary, then it will be non-zero, otherwise it will be 0. And the similar way we are calculating the force entries. First we are calculating the heat flux at the Gauss point, then the one dimensional shape function, just note down this one dimensional shape function at the Gauss point, the Jacobian in this case hm by 2, and the weight corresponding to the one dimensional case. So this part has already been explained earlier, how we calculate it numerically. Alright, so we loop over all the Gauss points, and at the end of which we will get the force vector part that has been contributed only due to the edges coinciding with the Neumann boundary. Alright, so this is the Gauss quadrature part. Once it is complete, we calculated the ith entry of the force vector, alright, corresponding to the Neumann boundary contribution. Alright, and once we have calculated the ith entry, now we have to add it to the element force vector. Alright, now just try to note that suppose element 4, suppose let me draw element 4. So if I draw element 4 here, only the element 4, okay, the global nodes are 8, 9, 7 and 4. So these are the global nodes. Alright, now these are the 2 internal boundaries, so we do not have to calculate anything. Alright, so this part lies in the Neumann boundary condition, okay, third boundary. Okay, so over this we have to calculate the contribution. So what we do, we are doing this, we are mapping it to the master element, okay, where xi bar varying from -1 to 1, alright, and certain points, that is the Gauss points, say xi bar p, we are calculating the corresponding physical point, okay, or corresponding point in the physical edge, okay. So xp, yp, and at those points we are calculating the heat flux Qn. Alright, now just we need to note that this fourth node, alright, that is global number, and this seventh node, that is a global number, but the associated local nodes are 1, 2, 3 and 4. Alright, so this third edge, which is having local node 3 and 4, has been mapped to 1 hat, 2 hat, okay. These are the local nodes of the master element. Now, so the local node 3 corresponds to the local node 2 hat, and local node 4 corresponds to the local node 1 hat. Alright, now in order to add, so we are calculating, in this case we are calculating F1 n, alright, and F2 n, but we have to add it to the local force vector which is of size 4 by 1 in this case. Now in this case we have 4 entries 1, 2, 3, 4. So now where to add these two guys? So what we have to do? We have to locate which local node this corresponds to, this one corresponds to. In this case the local 1 corresponds to 3 and the local 2 hat corresponds to 4, okay, local 4, right. So this F1 has to be added, F1 has to be added into the third entry of Fe, and F2 has to be added into the fourth entry of Fe, element force vector. So exactly that has been done. So the corresponding local number, okay, corresponds to this I. So this corresponds to the local number of the master element xi bar going from -1 to 1, where this corresponds to the quadrilateral element going from 1 to 4. So from I we are calculating Im, okay, and we are adding the contribution to the element force vector. Alright. So the loop over all the edges for the kth element ends here. Alright. So still the loop over k continues. Alright. Now the corresponding part is as follows. So we are declaring Fen as 0 initially. Alright. And then how do we calculate that? Because in each side of a given element of say degree p, there are p plus 1 number of shape functions. So that is how we declared Fen, alright, the size of Fen. Then we calculated for each Gauss point xp and yp, calculated the Qn at the given Gauss point, alright. Then we added with Feni, we added Qn at p, Ni at p, and then h by 2. So this is already taken care, here we have divided by 2, and then corresponding weight W at p. So this ensures the calculation of the Neumann boundary term numerically, and once we do that, we find out the corresponding local node in the quadrilateral element, and to that local entry we are adding this Fni. This minus sign is basically, if you look at the weak form, we had a minus sign, minus Qn Nids, alright. So since in Qn this part we haven't considered that minus sign, so here we have to take this as minus, alright. So this ends here, okay, and at the end of this what we are getting? We are getting the element stiffness entry and the element force vector, that is complete, including the Neumann boundary contribution of that kth element, alright. So at the end of this we get element stiffness matrix, element force vector for the kth element. Now we will go ahead and put the element contribution to the global system of equations. How do we do that? This is very simple. Look at the algorithm. Say I goes from 1 to number of degrees of freedom per element, okay, in this case 1 to 4. Then j goes from 1 to number of degrees of freedom, that is still 4, and in between from the connectivity information we are collecting the corresponding global node, alright. So in a given element I basically corresponds to the local number because it runs from 1 to 4, and Ig, which we have collected from the connectivity matrix, this basically gives the corresponding global number. Similarly Jg gives the corresponding global number of j, alright, and then the element stiffness matrix, the ijth entry has been added to the global stiffness matrix in the Ig location, alright. So that is how the element stiffness entries are added to the global system of equation or global stiffness matrix. And similarly the ith entry in the element force vector has been added to the ijth entry of the global force vector, alright. So this completes the assembly part, and let us look at how it has been implemented. We run from 1 to 4, then we look into the kth element, ith column, okay, because column means the local number. So, that gives us the global node number or global degrees of freedom. Alright, in this case both are same. Similarly, here for kth element, jth column we get the corresponding global number, then we added with kg the corresponding ke. Alright, similarly with fg we added the corresponding fe. Fine. So, this takes care of the assembly, and if you see this I and j closes here, and this end is basically the end of k. So, we are looping over all elements. Alright. So, we will visit each element, calculate the element stiffness entry, element force vector using Gauss quadrature, then we will add to the element force vector the Neumann boundary part if any, and then finally we will put the contribution of that element to the global system of equations, and we will erase the element stiffness matrix and element force vector and move to the next element. So, that is what we will show in the whole code. Now, once we complete the assembly, at the end of this we will get some global stiffness matrix. In this case, for example, I have shown a 5 by 5 matrix and a global force vector that is of size 5 by 1. Alright. So, in your case it will be the total degrees of freedom, okay, we will decide the global stiffness matrix and the global force vector size. Now, the system of equation looks like this, okay, we have obtained this matrix and the force vector, alright, at the end of the assembly. Now, this we cannot invert because this is rank deficient matrix, alright. Now, one thing that we did not ensure till now is the Dirichlet boundary part, okay. Now, suppose in this case I have to ensure that alpha 3 is taking a value a. So, a is defined, alright. So, I have to just enforce that alpha 3 is a. Now, how do we do that? First we take the third column. Where from we got the third column? From the third entry alpha 3. We have to ensure that alpha 3 is a. So, we get the third column, subtract it from the right hand side, okay. What is this guy? This guy is the global stiffness matrix, all the rows corresponding to the third column, okay. So, here I have shown it, alright. A is the value that we have to enforce, and third column we get from the alpha 3, alright. If I have to do it for alpha I, so I have to take the ith column, subtract a times ith column from the right hand side. So, this will be modified and we get this. Then we will make all the entries in the ith row, or in this case third row as 0 and third column as 0, and the third entry will be taken as 1, alright. So, modified part has been shown, all the entries are 0 here except this we have enforced it as 1. Finally, what we will do? We will just make this value, the modified value of this as a, alright. So, as you can see, obviously alpha 3 becomes a, okay. So, these are the steps that we have to do in order to ensure that alpha 3 is a. Fine. Now, there is another procedure where we delete the ith row, ith column, alright. Obviously, before that we have to modify the right hand side following this, and then in the solution vector we have to insert the value of alpha 3 as a, alright. After calculating other alphas, we just have to insert the value of alpha 3 as 1. So, this is another alternative method. So, we are following the first method that I discussed, and here is the implementation, alright. Now, first we have to find out which are the degrees of freedom that are lying on the Dirichlet boundary. So, you remember in the BC type we just put the number as negative wherever that node correspond, or the degrees of freedom corresponds to a Dirichlet boundary. So, in this case if I number it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, then this part for the current problem is on the Dirichlet boundary, alright. So, degrees of freedom 1, 8 and 4 lies in the Dirichlet boundary. So what we have to do? We have to ensure that alpha I is equal to 0 for I equal to 1, 4 and 8. Alright. So what we will do? We will find out in the BC type, okay, which entries are negative. Okay. So that will tell us the element number and the corresponding local edge number, and then what we will do? We will go to each of these local edges, alright, finding out the corresponding node number or the degrees of freedom, alright, and we will sort them, okay, because this node appears twice when we are visiting this element, okay, this node appears once, and when we are visiting this element again the node 8 appears. So the node 8 appears twice, so we are just taking only the unique numbers, alright. So this node DB will contain all the nodes or the degrees of freedom which lie on the Dirichlet boundary, right. Then we are running a loop over the length of the vector node DB, okay. In this case there are 3 nodes on the DB, so it will run from 1 to 3. Then so this is the jth node, so this basically says that alpha 1 has to be equal to 0, and we said how it has to be ensured. First, from the right hand side we have to subtract the value of the Dirichlet boundary, in this case 0, okay, which is equal to basically A equal to 0. So A times the jth column of the global stiffness matrix. Then ensure that jth row of the global stiffness matrix is 0, jth column of the global stiffness matrix is 0, then jth entry, okay, the entry in the kg, the global stiffness matrix, at the jth row, jth column, that has to be 1, okay, and finally the force vector, the jth entry has to be equal to A. So in this case this is basically the value, okay, the value of the Dirichlet boundary condition, and this runs for all the degrees of freedom that lies on the Dirichlet boundary. So at the end of this we have ensured that this alpha 1, alpha 4, alpha 8 would be 0, fine. So once we ensure the Dirichlet boundary, okay, we will now what we will do? Now we will solve the system of equations. So what we have to do? We have to just invert. So we will get alpha is equal to inverse of k, inverse of kg, okay, into fg, alright. Now we could have used that inverse command in MATLAB, but this backslash operator is much robust than this inverse operator, okay. So even if you use inverse operator, MATLAB will pop up and tell that it is better to use a backslash operator, okay. So you can look into the documentation of MATLAB, okay, for this backslash operator. So this basically does k inverse fg. So this is the solution vector, okay, containing all those alphas. So in this case if I look at this mesh, so there are 9 alphas, so it is 9 by 1, so we will get the solution, fine. So once we get the solution, next thing is to visualize. How will we visualize the solution? So for that you can go through this piece of code, okay. So how will you visualize? We will go to each element E, okay. We know the alphas for that element because we know from the connectivity the global node numbers, that is the global degrees of freedom numbers. So from the solution vector we can pick up those values of alpha, and if we multiply the ni's, ni is basically the same as ni hat, okay, at the point under consideration. So we just take alpha I ni, okay, that will give us the displacement u, sorry, that will give us the temperature in this case. Next, to calculate the heat flux, which is a vector in this case, we will follow the procedure minus lambda naught gradient of u, and u, if I substitute alpha I ni, so we get alpha I gradient of ni, alright. Now gradient of ni means these are the gradient of say functions in the physical element, so we have to convert it into the gradient in the master element. So, that we already discussed, that is J inverse transpose into gradient of Ni. So, Q can be calculated following this. Alright. So, let us look into this piece of code where we have implemented this algorithm. Alright. First we have created a grid. Okay. So, in the master element, okay, we have taken some points in the xi direction and similarly in the eta direction. So, that we have done throughout the mesh. Alright. So, those are basically the xi's and etas, and then we reshaped them into a vector form. Alright, and then calculated the shape functions at those points. So, this is not calculated at the Gauss point, rather these are calculated at those points, okay, which we obtained from this grid. Okay. So, that is what we are putting it here. Okay. These are calculated at some point xi m eta m. Okay. These are not the Gauss points, at those grid points. Okay. Similarly, we calculated the derivatives of the shape functions in the master element at those grid points. Then we loop over all the elements. So, we will go to each element, calculated the corner nodes, okay, and from there we calculated the from there we found out the coordinates of the corner nodes. From this piece of code we are getting xi ni, so it means it is giving the corresponding point in the physical element. Okay. Then we are calculating the lambda values at those points in the physical element. Then here we calculate the, or we found out the solution corresponding to the degrees of freedom in that particular element. So, from the solution vector u we are finding out only the values of the alpha i's that corresponding to that particular element. Okay. So, that we are storing at alpha, and then we are multiplying alpha I ni. So, that is what has been shown here. So, that u gives us the temperature in that element, okay, at all those grid points. Then we again reshaped it back, okay, because we have to provide MATLAB in the format we started with. Alright, and we plotted as a surface plot. So, this tells us or shows us the temperature distribution in each of the elements. So, if we run over all the elements, okay, so we will get the whole we will get the temperature distribution in the whole domain. Next we calculated the coordinate matrix that we already did in the earlier piece of code. Then this shows the Jacobian part. Okay. We calculated the derivatives in the physical element, and from there we are getting the q as lambda at the pth point into the derivative of the shape functions at the pth point into the alpha. So, this piece of code. Okay. So, that has been implemented here to obtain the heat flux. So, you just note down this is a vector containing two components qx and qy. Again we reshaped it back and we plotted, okay, just to see how heat is flowing through the domain. Alright. So, this is not the only way this can be implemented. There are better visualization softwares where you can export your solution in terms of u and q. Okay. So, there also you can visualize the solution. So, now I will show you the code where all the steps are implemented one by one. Okay. So, let us look at the code now. So, this part basically implements the data that we need to provide. First we need to specify how the conductivity is varying. Okay. So, this has been denoted by a function handle. Then body source term has been defined. This defines the Neumann boundary values. So, there are three functions for the first boundary, second boundary and the third boundary. Okay. And finally, this defines the value of the Dirichlet boundary condition. Okay. Next we define the degree P, okay, the number of nodes per element and the degrees of freedom per node, in this case 1. So we get the total number of degrees of freedom per element as number of node per element into degrees of freedom per node, alright. And these are the data that tells us that which are the nodes that lie on a given edge of a given element, okay. So this gives the local number for a given degree P. This part of the code already explained, so that contains the information regarding the Gauss point and the weight for 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional cases, alright. Then we calculated the shape functions, 2-dimensional and 1-dimensional shape functions, and the derivatives of the 2-dimensional shape functions at the Gauss point, alright, the way it has been explained in one of the slides. Finally, we get some information regarding the mesh, okay, from one of the file, okay, the file is already saved, okay. So we started with one element as I said earlier, and then we keep on increasing the number of elements, alright. So this gives the total number of element in the mesh, total number of nodes in the mesh, and total number of degrees of freedom in the mesh. So in this case, number of degrees of freedom and number of nodes in the whole mesh are same, because the degree of freedom per node is 1, alright. Then we declare the global stiffness matrix and the global force vector as 0, okay, and the size is denoted by the number of total degrees of freedom in the mesh, okay. Then we, as I said, we loop over all the elements, fine. We calculated the element stiffness matrix, okay, up to this. We calculated the element stiffness matrix, element force vector, okay. This force vector contains only the body source term, alright, or this element force vector contains only the heat source term, alright, using Gauss quadrature. Then the next part contains the calculation of Neumann boundary, okay, if any, for that kth element, and then we will assemble the element contribution to the global system of equations or global stiffness matrix and global force vector, and here the element loop ends, okay. So we do it for all the elements. Then we applied the Dirichlet boundary, okay. We first find out the element and the corresponding edges where the Dirichlet boundary is applicable, and we implemented that part, and finally we solved, okay, using the backslash operator. Then let me comment this. Then we just note down the maximum temperature, okay, magnitude, okay, and how many unknowns are there. So we just noted it in these two variables, alright. Finally we plotted, okay. So this is the number of variation versus the maximum temperature. So this I will discuss later. And finally I use this post processor, so this function. So if we look at this function, this is exactly the same that has been explained, okay, which basically gives us the temperature distribution, okay, in the whole domain, and finally the heat flow, how the heat is flowing in the domain, alright. So you can even plot surface plot also for Qx and Qy individually, alright. Now let us run it, okay. Here what we have done is we have run it initially for mesh which is having only one element, alright, which is having only one element. So if you look at mesh info 1, there the connectivity matrix, okay, as you can see here we have only one row, alright. So it tells me that it has only one element, alright. So let us go ahead and run this problem for one element, alright. Yeah, so we got few results here. So let me minimize this for the timing. Let us look at this. So this is basically showing the temperature distribution in the domain. This we cannot understand until unless we put the color bar, and if we look at the surface plot, so this is how temperature is varying. So even if it shows number of squares, doesn't mean that we have so many squares. It's just because we have taken so many grid points in a given elements, that's why it shows so many colors, okay. But we have taken only one element in this case. Now if you note down here in the two dimensional case, suppose the left end, alright, left end the value of the temperature is 0, okay, because we have ensured that as 0, alright. So Dirichlet boundary condition will be accurate because we have enforced that, alright. And this is the point, this right upper corner will be having the maximum temperature in the magnitude sense. So in this case it is negative, and the value you can just click on the data point, the value is minus 1.3, alright. So now next what we are going to do is we are going to increase the number of elements, alright, and we will just note down how the temperature at that upper right corner is varying, alright. So once we know how to code, once the code is implemented and is running, now we need to check whether the results that we are getting is correct or not. So for that we have to take a benchmark problem and validate that. So that I will be discussing later, or will be explained through an assignment. Now in this case what I want to show you, that in a given finite element code, what we do, we initially start with a coarse mesh, okay. In this case I have started with a single element, alright, and run the whole thing, and we obtain the temperature distribution as also the heat flux. So if you look at the second figure, what is showing is basically showing the heat flow in the domain. So as you can see, the heat is flowing towards the upper right corner through within the domain, alright. So you can individually plot qx qy also just for your own query, alright. So now we will go and increase the mesh. So in the second step what we have done is we have increased the, or we have refined the meshing, and we have taken 4 elements. So the same domain, okay, running having the unit square, the same domain we have refined it with 4 elements, alright, discretized with 4 elements. So if I run mesh info 2, okay, and look at this connectivity matrix, now you see there are 4 rows, and as I described in connectivity matrix there are 4 rows. So 4 row corresponds to 4 elements. So in the mesh we have 4 elements. Now we can again run it, okay, just by changing the refinement step, okay, right. So refinement step means initially we will start with a coarse mesh, then we will gradually refine the mesh, that is we will discretize the domain with more and more number of elements, and we will run the same program, alright, ensuring all the boundary conditions and all, and we will see how the result changes, alright. So let me demonstrate it by running it with so if I make it as 2, right, let us comment this, okay, and we have to open the corresponding end because this is running over the refinement step. So it will solve it once for one element, then again it will solve for 2 elements, and so on. Okay. And we have already taken care the corresponding mesh information. So that has been stored in mesh info 1, 2, 3 and so on. Alright. So in each of the case, if you look at the information in each of the mat file, okay, you will see it will show you how many elements are there. So the element number increases like 4, then it becomes 16, then becomes 64 and 256 and so on. Alright. So that way the number of elements will increase. Now for refinement step 2, we have only 4 elements. Alright. So let me just run this. Okay. The same thing it is showing. Here you see the temperature distribution. Okay. Alright. So there is a slight curvature initially, which was just a plane. Now there is a slight change. Okay. The planes are not, because there are 4 elements. So each of the elements are in a plane, but those planes are, but they are C0 continuous. You see at the boundary they are continuous. And this piece of picture shows the heat flux. Okay. How the heat is flowing through the domain. Now let us run it for all the refinement steps. Alright, by making it 5. Here I have run it for 5. Alright. So if I run it for 5 refinement steps, means so we started with 1 element, then 4 element, then 16 element, then 64 element, and then lastly for 256 elements. Alright. So it will take some time to show the heat flux part. Alright. But the calculation part is over. What is most important is, what we want to show through this is, as the number of unknown increases, because initially we had 1 element, we have 4 unknowns, but with 4 elements we had how many, you can just check how many unknowns we had. That depends on the how many nodes we have. Alright. So that we can look at the mesh. Alright. So 4 element, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 9. So we had 9 unknowns. Okay. So as we go on increase the number of elements, we will be having more and more unknowns. Now if I look at the first figure, that is what is most important, the maximum temperature, that is the magnitude, okay, which happened to be in the right upper corner. Okay. So let me show you this. So that happened in the right upper corner. So this is the maximum change, okay, here. So that we have noted down and plotted with number of unknowns. Alright. So finally what we have here is, as you can see here, we have 289 unknowns. Okay. Initially we had only 4 unknowns, and as we increase the number of elements, our number of unknown increased. Alright. But you see, after some time the value in the temperature at the upper rightmost corner doesn't change anymore. Alright. So it implies that the solution has converged to a point. Alright. So we can do the same thing with some kind of energy also. Alright. Here I have just demonstrated with the maximum value of the temperature, maximum change in value of temperature. Alright. So this we have to always ensure. So the first solution is not acceptable. Till the solution converges, we have to wait, and the final solution only is an acceptable solution. So please note down correction. As I said earlier, this node number 3 and node number 4, so they have been mapped to node number 2 hat and 1 hat. Okay. So that is not the case, because we have to go anti-clockwise. Alright. So in order to do that, the node number 3 has been mapped to node number 1 hat, and node number 4 has been mapped to node number 2 hat. alright. So that is why the calculated F1n, okay, that corresponds to the node 1 hat. So that will be added to the third entry of the force vector, and similarly the F2n will be added to the fourth entry of the element force vector, alright. So please note down this error correction, because we always go anti-clockwise, okay. In order to do that, 3 has been mapped to 1 hat and 4 has been mapped to 2 hat, alright. So this is always followed, alright. We move along the edge, we move in the counterclockwise direction, alright.